neighborhood council meeting. We're asking for members, Zine and Han, to come up, and we are also waiting for the interim general manager to come forward. So I guess he's on his way. I also want to point out that item number 3 will be continued. I'm not on item number 3. I think we need to do a little more work before and get more consensus before we bring it up to this committee. So I'm going to pull that. I understand the Ethics Commission did not have a chance to review it, and so you had a meeting postponed today or something. So all those things considered, I'm going to pull it until after your next meeting is June
10th. It's 11th?
June 11th. And our meeting after that would be when?
It would be, I don't have a calendar. It's the following week.
I'll check right now. On the 10th.
On the 10th or the 24th of June?
Ours
Yes.
It's
is the
24th.
10th, and your meeting
24th.
is at what time? Okay. Then we'll schedule this item for the 24th and make sure we get all the parties. By that time, hopefully, we'll have a permanent GM identified and.
Yes.
So we will reschedule that item for June 24th.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Kim. Step forward. Okay, item number 1.
Item number 1 is a communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Kim as General Manager, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment.
Mr. Kim,
Bangwan Kim, Interim General Manager, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. Good morning, Councilman.
are you sure you want this job?
Many of my colleagues have asked me the very same thing.
Let me say that it's been a very tumultuous year. A lot of it is positive. I think most of it is very positive. Nevertheless, it's been quite tumultuous. We have the Review Commission's report that was processed this year. We have a budget situation that may redefine some of the roles. The Review Commission's recommendations and the Council's actions relative to the Review Commission will also redefine your role, and still sort of unsettled, particularly with the election process moving to the city clerk and what happens to the people who stay in the department. I mentioned the budget situation, which are specifically a crisis, a reduction in staff. And then obviously the passing of Carol Baker Tharp cannot be understated. I think anybody who would serve in the position that you've served would have a very difficult time at best, because I haven't even mentioned the whole notion that we're still in the initial stage, I think, or maybe the second stage, but it's not a 3-stage process. It's probably a 10-stage process. But we're still in the toddler stage of the neighborhood council system. So I think that and then on top of all that, we have you represent the bureaucratic process for a process that's political. And so it's a very difficult time. And I want to make it very clear that I don't think anybody could have managed the department without there being issues. And having come out of the bureaucracy myself, I know how competitive it is and how political it can get relative to the civil service process. But So it's been a challenge. And I'd like you to sort of address that challenge and how you see us moving forward from this point. But I want you to understand that that I don't think we necessarily had the best view of what you can do as general manager during this past 6 months, because everything has been up in the air, and we are only now beginning to settle down with some direction in terms of the those things that I mentioned. So maybe the jury's still out as you're entering into this possibility, but I believe that the actions that we have taken actually have set a positive tone and will solidify some things. So if you could just comment on sort of the past 6 months and what it's been like and how you think that prepares you for the position of general manager, a permanent position, I should say.
Well, thank you, Councilman. I think you put it well, and it has been actually 12 months since I first started with Carol Baker Tharp. And I would say that I would defy anybody to go through what I've been through over the past 12 months, and coming in as an assistant general manager, then being appointed an acting general manager for when Carol went on medical leave, and then to be an interim general manager all within 12 months. I don't think anybody could break that record, but maybe I could ask the city clerk.
I think there probably has been. I heard that one guy that got fired after 1 month. That was
Oh, really? Okay. We don't want to go there. Then.
His AGM was probably expedited.
But what I think Carol and I came in with very much the same kind of philosophy and perspective about the possibilities of the neighborhood council system. And we were floored by what we saw when we came in, a department that had been, I think, since its formation, constantly having to change and react to political pressures and mandates from city council, the mayor, the neighborhood councils themselves. And so, coming from the nonprofit world, I'm kind of trained to approach things in a more systematic way by strategic planning, setting your goals, setting your priorities, and then aligning all your resources to achieve goals and performance measures. The department has never done any planning. And so that's what I've instituted. And, the department, I think, to its credit, the staff have really done a lot with very little. And it's always been up to the staff to try to make things work when a lot of the policies were contradictory, didn't make sense. I think it was revealed as we transitioned the elections out from department to city clerk that Dunn ended up with having to implement bureaucratic procedures that then diverted its resources from the true mission. So much of the work has really been about building the system from a bureaucratic perspective. Certification, that's a bureaucratic procedure. Elections, that's a bureaucratic procedure. Grievances, those are all bureaucratic procedures. And so this next iteration of Dunn, and what excites me about the historic transition from elections to city clerk, although you'd have to ask the city clerk how historic they see that transition, is it really frees our resources up to focus on the vision and the mission, which is around capacity building, education, training, outreach, visibility, getting the word out in diverse communities that this is an exciting opportunity for people to make a difference. And we are about 9 months away from being able to do that because we still have to administer elections up until December. But right now what I'm doing is working with staff to really look at what we're going to focus the majority of our resources in doing. And I think a lot of the staff will really see the potential for the first time, I think since its formation. There have been staff who have been there from the beginning, are really seeing the fundamental shifts that are taking place as a result, thanks to your leadership in terms of transitioning the elections over, but also in implementing a lot of the NCRC recommendations at the pace that you have. So I think with the combination of the NCRC recommendations, my potential permanent appointment to the general manager position, that we are seeing the alignment of some major elements that are finally, I think, going to get us to the track where we can really focus on the success of the neighborhood councils. And the way that I would measure done success is how successful neighborhood councils are. You've got some neighborhood councils that are just doing some amazing work, policy advocacy, distributing their resources in some strategic ways. But you also have some struggling neighborhood councils. What I'd like to see across the board is greater parity and equity in terms of outcomes and performance, and how well they are reaching out to their neighborhoods, expressing the viewpoints of constituents in their neighborhoods. And we've got a long way to go. But I see that this is really a very important moment in the history of the neighborhood council system, because there are all these changes taking place.
Now, I have this theory about the history of the closest thing I can relate to this historically was the transition of the Model Cities program into the Community Development Department.
Right.
Essentially, we took grassroots activists in various communities that had formulated themselves into institutions, mostly nonprofit organizations, some faith-based organizations as well. But then we took the city and we said we're going to institutionalize this, and we took what had been political, Model Cities program in the mayor's office, and moved it into a bureaucracy, the Community Development Department.
Right.
And the requirements to be a staffer in the Community Development Department eventually transitioned into a full-blown civil service process. Initially, they were appointed for their knowledge of the community, but eventually they were bureaucrats, and that had to go through the civil service testing process. The communities, I believe, have ever since struggled with the bureaucracy that was created, feeling that it wasn't reflecting the goals to empower the community that were served. In fact, the organizers that were the initial embodiment of the community organizing drive became bureaucratized themselves. They became bureaucracies, nonprofit institutions, where the people who were the grassroots activists, perhaps without any kind of certificate of education, were secondary to the professionals who came in and became I remember going through the process myself when I worked at Project Heavy, and I was hired as a community organizer, but by the time I left, 2 years later, I had served in 4 positions, and the last one was statistical research analyst, bookkeeper trainer. That was my title, my official title. The CETA program, which I know you're familiar with, required that you change the job description every year. I never understood that requirement. But they also required that you increase the credentials. So instead of getting, in the disenfranchised communities, people who were grassroots, knowledgeable about their community, and people who knew who to call to get resources in, I could name names, but I'm not going to, were put aside for people who didn't live in the community but had credentials. And so some of the strongest organizations, in terms of getting funding from the city of Los Angeles, became those organizations that had staffs that actually didn't reflect the community. In some cases, particularly in the ethnic organizations, that was not the case because of the ethnic requirement or the language requirement, whatever it was. But I fear the same thing could happen here. I fear the same thing could happen with a similar thing happened with the Bridges program and the gang response. We bureaucratized the process, and we created a system of academics trying to solve problems of youth in our community, and I fear the same thing could happen with the latest iteration of efforts to reduce gang violence. I don't want that same thing to happen with Dunn. I don't want the same thing to happen with the neighborhood council system. In fact, the charter sort of dictates that it not happen, and they will always be elected officials, and so that's a little different. And because they are dispersed, and they have to have a community interest in that area, it's a little bit different. I believe the goal of Dunn is to not be noticed. The function of community development department was less important than what was going on in the community. The function of the gang violence reduction efforts, it was less important whether it was managed by community development, the mayor's office, or whoever, than what was actually going on in the community. The same thing here. What is more important is the neighborhood council. I basically see Dunn in more of a position, ironically, because we transitioned the election process over to the city clerk, but I see Dunn in a position of being like the city clerk, where the best news could be that it is not noticed. If it is noticed, we got a problem. Same thing with Dunn. And so, under your direction, I would hope that Dunn's approach is to empower the neighborhood councils to be the activists, not to empower Dunn, but to empower the communities, particularly those that are disenfranchised. I apologize, but go ahead. If you could just react to that, and I'll try to stop this.
No, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of Dunn's role. And I think the problems have occurred when Dunn has tried to intervene in the affairs of neighborhood councils, because, in a lot of ways, Dunn is a little different than the city clerk's mandate in that we are charged with empowering these independent entities that can make life uncomfortable for elected officials, and a lot of people, both within the city and the neighborhood council world, will point to Dunn and say, "Dunn, what are you going to do about this?" And for the longest time, for the fact that we haven't had any resources for people to go to, we would try to take that role upon ourselves, and we would often get in trouble. So one example is the grievance system that we're constructing. We now have a way to shift the issues that come out of the neighborhood councils in terms of grievances to a jury of peers. And that's the kind of system building work that Dunn has to do. I see that as part of our mandate, is having to help build the bridge. I call it building the bridge while you're walking over it at the same time. And I think that's a lot of that people on the council and in the neighborhood council world don't see as much, but that's something that Dunn and Bonk and the staff see. So if I had my way in the staffing structure, I would have a policy director that would help us figure out what are the policies and procedures and systems that we need to have in place so that the process of empowerment and working with the city is as seamless as possible. It's far from that now. And that's the major charge I see for Dunn. We are basically serving as a...
I don't think it'll ever be perfect.
No.
It's a democracy.
Never.
Democracy
Right.
has to move. It has to change.
Right. And there has to be controversy, and sometimes controversy is good. But that we are... we're a cheerleader for neighborhood councils. I am personally an advocate for neighborhood councils, but I'm also an advocate for the city government. We have to play a middleman role. Neighborhood Council Review Commission has referred to a part of Dunn's role as a translator, that we have to help the city departments and some council offices better understand how neighborhood councils work, what are the ins and outs of the system. We've had one councilman ask Dunn to eject a troublesome board president, and we're saying, Councilman, we can't do that. That's not our authority. But that we are constructing this process by which there is greater accountability for the elected boards from the communities. So those are the kinds of roles that I see us playing, and it's very much behind the scenes. And I concur with your larger kind of vision in terms of Dunn's role, is that we are not to be seen, and when we do surface, that is not good news. The funding program is another major program of Dunn that a lot of people don't see, but we administer almost $4.5 million in public funds, and we've been understaffed for a long period of time. Dunn is not the best department in the beginning to have taken on that kind of role. Both. Both.
I'm referring to the election process, now not having that.
Right.
You might be able to.
Yeah, but I think now it makes sense for the funding program to be nested within Dunn, because that's an empowerment resource for neighborhood councils. And what we have to do is a better job of training neighborhood councils how to use their resources in more strategic ways. Again, having neighborhood councils adopt a plan. You've introduced motions that require neighborhood councils to conduct town hall meetings and use those results to form their budgets. That's where I'd like to go for all 88 neighborhood councils. Some are doing it, most are not.
Well, this is interesting because when we were elected, nobody gave us training. I mean, we do have ethics training, I should say. That's during the campaign process.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get elected, if you want training, you have to go get it.
Right.
So, and we also don't have a grievance process. So, what is it that what is it you're training them to do, and what are they grieving about?
Right.
And what are we trying to resolve in a grievance process, as opposed to just letting it go like we're let go?
Well, I would argue that elected officials do get trained, but I would call it the school of hard knocks. That, you are trained through years and years of working with the public, working with communities, working with diverse people. Many of the elected board members don't have that kind of experience. So we have to try to shortcut that lack of experience in public problem solving by giving them some basic tools. The Brown Act can be a very intimidating process for people who've never seen it before. But if we can get them some exposure about what it is, it doesn't become as much an issue for people. So those are the kinds of things that, and getting back to your comment about bureaucracy, neighborhood councils, the processes by which they make decisions, have become more bureaucratic than even what I'm used to working in the nonprofit world. But I think that can't be helped, because neighborhood councils are an extension of city government. Our job is to try to make the bureaucracy as least problematic as possible. The grievances have to do with neighborhood council. One individual can hold an entire neighborhood council back. And we've seen it time and time again. And the community just suffers as a result of that. So what I see our role as being is providing some resources to resolve these grievances so that they're not just left unresolved all the time. A lot of it comes to personality clashes.
What does that mean? I mean, we have council, we have personalities, and I mean, why do we have to resolve anything? I mean, it's counterintuitive in a political entity to have a grievance. I don't know that maybe Rafe knows, but are there grievance processes and other? Maybe we have one and we just never used it in the city council. But why do we have to resolve griefs by essentially elected officials?
Well,
how do you go in and resolve those without being political?
Right. Well, by comparing it with, say, the city council, I think the ground rules are much more transparent, and people know what the ground rules are, so that you can work through disagreements such that you have a majority and a minority viewpoint. Neighborhood councils don't. A lot of times, people don't even know what the ground rules are. They don't know what their bylaws say. They don't know what the Brown Act is. They don't know Robert's rules, and so a lot of times it just becomes a free-for-all. I would think that. So what our job at Dunn is to try to make the ground rules as transparent as possible, so that people can work through disagreements, so that they're resolving these in a timely
What
manner.
kind of disagreements are we talking about?
It could be anything from a person who lost a board race, who's constantly filing grievances when the modus operandi is really to kind of inhibit the actions of the neighborhood council. So they're working an agenda to hold the neighborhood council back because they feel like they should have won an election. It could be a range of hundreds of numbers of
We could say the same
examples.
thing about Zuma dog, or any gadfly out there. Maybe, why is this? How is this different?
It's different in that, again, the ground rules and I think the parameters of decision-making are clearer, so that there are boundaries that the city council establishes in terms of its decision-making process, so that you can incorporate the views of the public, but still get on with the business of running the city. A lot of times neighborhood councils don't know what those parameters are, and so they end up not staying on point, and they allow it could be a small faction. It may not just be one, but it's a faction of 2 or 3 different entities that are trying to take over the neighborhood council. So I think ultimately it really does come down to power and control. And how are people, and while that is a part of the political process, our job is to try to make sure that the ground rules and the parameters of decision making are as clear as possible, so that people are working through problems as opposed to allowing the grievances to inhibit their actions, which is more often what's happening.
Well, I hope we don't lose the spirit of the neighborhood council in doing so.
Mhm.
We don't want to bureaucratize the neighborhood councils.
Right.
I just want to. My concern is that if somebody wants to mau the process,
Mhm.
as long as they're going by the rules, they can do that.
Right.
I mean, that's part of a democracy, is allowing somebody to express themselves. But if we're talking, I'm a little unclear exactly what kinds of grievances we should involve ourselves in. And I think we need to crystallize that,
Mhm.
because if we don't, we could be criticized for inhibiting somebody to express their
Right.
personal opinion,
Right.
and claim that it was just to resolve a clash.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be very careful with how we implement our grievance, because whose opinion is right?
Right.
It's more of a mediation service than it is. It should be more of a mediation process than a grievance where one is right and one is wrong.
And the work group, I think the problem has been that we have never constructed a clear grievance resolution system. We put together a work group that Rafe Sonnenschein is heading
See,
with
I'm not-
neighborhood
that's what
councils
I'm-
to
what
try to do
qualifies
that.
as a grievance? I mean, does somebody actually file a piece of paper and say, I'm aggrieved and my
Yeah.
my grief
It is
is
a grief.
this? I mean, I think that's a very dangerous road to go down. On the other hand, if Dunn was going to provide a mediation service,
Mhm.
that might be very different. Is there anything that requires this?
Yes, Gwen Poindexter, City Attorney. The language about filing of grievances and complaints, which are two processes, is
Yeah,
actually
right.
in the plan and in the ordinance. So City Council, years ago, when we first adopted the program, thought that was something that they should have in the system.
Mhm. But there's nothing that prohibits the department from initiating a mediation as part of that process.
No, that's correct.
Okay, so I would strongly
Yeah,
encourage that.
we
you
are
take-
including that in
You
the-
take that tone, because mediation suggests that you're not there to take sides.
Right.
Grievance, somebody's right, somebody's wrong.
Mhm.
I don't know, it's much stronger. But if that's the rules, we'll dance with them as much as we have to. Mr. Zine?
The turnover. You still have the tremendous turnover in the Dunn staff.
Mm-hmm.
How do we stabilize that?
Well, we are
We appoint him.
turn.
Well, other than appointing him. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about the people.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting that's an interesting perspective. I'll be the 7th general manager for Dunn in 7 years.
1 a year.
Yeah.
He's lucky.
So
Although this is the year of the Ocho.
of the Ocho.
Year of the 8.
Right.
Year of the rat, I thought it was.
So
Was it dog? Oh, no, the last one was yard, this is the rat.
this is the rat.
Yeah.
In the civil service system, as I've come to learn, turnover is kind of a regular thing. Every 2 or 3 years, when people look to see an opportunity to promote out, they will go to another department.
Are most of them staying with the city and not going?
Most of them are staying with the city,
They're
mostly
taking-
going to
They're
DWP.
taking promotal, I mean,
DWP.
Dennis knows, Dennis and I both know about the promotability.
Yeah.
And
But don't they have a pecking order within the department where there is a promotional process? If you come into Dunn at a certain level, and then you can work your way, like the police department or the fire department or...
Yeah, well, being a smaller department, we have 51. Well, now with the final budget, it'll be 48 positions because we got 3 positions taken away. There aren't really a lot.
Senior management analyst,
Mhm.
and then they end up on the top of the principal management analyst list.
Yep,
Then they go.
they'll go.
Go, wherever.
Because we don't have that many promotion opportunities within the department.
All right, so that's something that you don't have any real control over.
Not entirely, although, I have been instituting internal procedures that prioritize staff with internal experience when there are promotion opportunities available. So I would rather look internally rather than look outside when openings develop. The field staff have recently been converted to civil service, as you know. We had 21 exempt positions. We gave back 18. And those will be civil service positions probably within 4 months. So we don't quite know what's going to happen with the people in those positions. Some of them may decide that they have had enough with Dunn and want to look for similar kinds of positions in other city departments. But
Do we know that Dunn's transfer rate is any higher than any other department?
I've never looked at that.
I mean, obviously, the police department, people stay in it, but the
Oh, planning, building and safety,
Yeah.
sanitation.
well, building and safety, they're not going to move. I mean, they got to stay in that department, but.
Well,
because-
most of them make it a career, though. That's what I'm trying to say, is that...
No, but not.
You got a promotional
not-
process.
Not the administrative staff. They
No.
will move from building and safety to sanitation.
Right.
I mean, I was a personnel analyst. I would move whatever department,
You've gone down here.
the highest,
Mhm.
the highest, job that I could get, I would take. And
That's correct.
so I don't know that Dunn's civil service is moving any differently. In fact, the smaller departments have a tough time keeping people. But,
Well, it did...
but the exempt positions, because they can't move into any other job, they would stabilize them. So
Right.
we're kind of going in the reverse. By
Right.
creating civil service, there's more opportunity for transfer.
That's correct.
More opportunity for transfer.
It's the same, it's the exact same thing we did with CDD. Well, once we gave them civil service, they moved all over the system.
Yeah. And when we had so many exempt positions, the argument was made that the field staff work resembled more the field staff of council offices because they have to attend so many evening meetings, and that's a civil service barrier. They can't do their job duties.
It created an issue. The situation I see happening in some neighborhoods is there's a neighborhood council with elected neighborhood council representatives, and there's groups that were part of that no longer get along with them. So now they're spinning off into their own environments. And then there was a conflict because neighborhood council folks come and say, we're the established neighborhood council, yet these other folks who were part of it, for whatever dissatisfaction, are now forming their own groups. Have you seen a lot of that take place? Because I see some of it happening right now. And then those groups come to us and want support, this and that and the other, say, well, go to neighborhood council. Well, we don't want to go to neighborhood council.
Right.
You know,
Right.
this clash.
Yeah, that may become a policy issue for the council to consider. I've heard the most concrete examples I've heard are in Councilman Rosenthal's district, where they call themselves community councils, and they are petitioning Dunn to be recognized as neighborhood councils, but they want to reap the benefits of being a neighborhood council, but they don't want to follow the bureaucratic procedures that govern certified neighborhood councils. So, for example, their main position is they want to hold on to the right to sue the city, and if they become a certified neighborhood council, they lose that power. So it's a
But that's not a bureaucratic thing, that's charter.
that's a charter.
In other words, they have to adhere to the charter. It's not that they're just mounting a challenge to this bureaucracy. They're mounting a challenge to the charter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that there is a requirement that is based in the charter.
Correct.
But it creates an unhappiness in the community where you've got these fighting forces allegedly for the benefit of the community, where one gets the money, the support, the
Right.
connection,
Right.
and the other is trying to pull from that. And I see competing. No, the homeowner groups, I don't think they compete at all. The homeowner groups are doing their thing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to worry about the Brown Act. They do whatever they do. And some of those have remained in place. But then this other, and I've just seen it of recent time in the Valley, where emerging separation from the neighborhood council
Right.
for whatever dissatisfaction they had, and they couldn't resolve whatever personality conflicts, basically.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of that.
It troubles me that they now come and say, well, we want money and we want this. We'll go to the neighborhood council. Well, we don't want to go to neighborhood council. Don't come to me.
Well,
So that's a problem that maybe policy needs to look at, to say, how do we handle it when they splinter off? And you're not going to have two neighborhood councils in the same community
Right.
fighting against each other.
No.
And when Janice Hahn and myself and Nick Pacheco were part of the Charter Commission, we never envisioned any of these problems. We thought everybody get together, have picnics on the weekends and holiday parties.
No, you didn't.
We did. We had no idea it was going to get like this.
There was an assumption of goodwill, wasn't there?
There was an assumption.
Just like council.
I think what we looked at is the established homeowner organizations, like Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. They've been around for many, many years. They get along. They do their thing. Everybody seemed to be happy with it. And I think maybe we were so naive to think that we could duplicate that citywide without having all the problems and having Rabbi Freeling come in and teach civility to the people who weren't getting along. And I know it's an awful challenge. I mean, the goal is notable. The goal is worthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's frustrating to see something that you thought would really blossom into something beautiful
Yeah.
kind of go through this challenge. And I respect you for wanting to stay with it, because your 6 predecessors said thank you very much and move on to something else. The other thing, we got a letter, or I don't know if it was an email or a letter, regarding something about a survey that was done. Did you see this?
Yes, I did.
And can you comment on that, please?
As I mentioned, their staff morale has been an issue largely because the department has undergone so many changes. My position has undergone a lot of changes in a short period of time. And the department has been overworked and under-resourced. So there is a lot of stress that the staff is facing. So I am approaching the issue of staff morale as a top priority. One of the steps that I've taken is to institute an organizational health survey, because I thought it was important for me to see how people are feeling, and it was an anonymous survey, and it was the first honest look at how people are feeling about the organization. A lot of the criticism was directed at me, and I accept that. That's my responsibility as the general manager for the department. But
I think you're the first general manager who's ever been criticized.
In the history of general
that's how bad a job I'm doing.
and you're here for more. He likes torture.
I think you got to worry about general managers who never get criticized.
Yeah, but as they say, every good leader looks at feedback, particularly on their weaknesses. And I'm going to take that information that people are saying that I need to pay attention to. And I think that what I've been instituted in terms of strategic planning, figuring out what our priorities are, and then getting people to focus on our goals and our priorities as opposed to reacting to external pressures is going to go a long way towards helping people feel like they're actually making a difference. I think that's what contributes the most to staff morale, is whether people are feeling like they're actually contributing to the department doing good work out in the community. And we have a lot of really dedicated, skilled staff people, and I'm very optimistic that we're going to turn the corner.
Can I ask you,
Well, one more question. So, and it talks about this was released or something. It doesn't. It was strong. Release of the confidential survey information is destructive. Who did they release it to?
It was not designed to be public information. It was supposed to be internal, for internal purposes only.
Okay, so that's what they're talking about with that.
Yes.
can I ask you, these people that signed the letter, are they exempt positions primarily?
No, they would be civil service, I would gather. But I don't know who sent the email, so
Well, I don't know if this is.
it was not under my authority to release that.
This is a letter to this committee.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about this letter,
I
okay.
didn't know how many there were. Maybe there's more. That we
There
don't
are
know.
two emails that went to you. One that
I
was...
just want to know about this one.
Oh, this one-
And I'm asking if these people who have signed this letter, are they exempt positions or civil service? Is there, see, I'll just tell you why I'm asking this question. One of the transitions that the department's going through is going from exempt to civil service.
Right.
Civil service requires an exam process. The way you write the job description and formulate the test is something that everybody will complain about, particularly if it exposes their weaknesses. So, so it's a very tumultuous situation, as I said, because those people who think that the job descriptions and the tests do not reflect their best light will challenge the whole system because they're trying to protect their job.
Right.
Now, so what was the process? Is it a simple, you're granted civil service status, or?
No, we put together a series of performance measures during the probationary evaluation period that reflects their main job duties.
So that was part of the test?
That is part of the probationary period evaluation. The
But
convert.
How did they get into the position? There, in civil service, you have to have a test. So was the test their previous experience?
Their
They
test
were
was
granted-
primarily
they were
previous
granted civil
experience, yes.
service, they were just granted civil service based on their being in the position.
Correct.
But then they go through a probationary period.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And this letter is signed mostly by field staff, so it'll be the staff that are being converted from exempt to civil service. I thought you were talking about another email that did not go
Now
on
we wanna see that
under
one.
my.
Is that
but-
the one, May 12th?
That's what we're looking at right now, the May 12th one, right? That's
Yes.
not-
I have another one, May 12th, regarding
Where's that?
Budget Committee that Dunn will need an extra $100,000 to conduct the elections, that the city clerk cannot get geared up
Right.
fast enough to handle. Do you see, you know about that
I
one?
don't
Yes,
have that
I do.
one. Where'd you get that one?
Well, I don't know, it's in my notes here.
Is it anonymous?
Well, that's related to
No,
the
it-
budget.
It has to, it says who it's from. It's not anonymous.
No, that one would be related to our budget process as we're going through adopting our final budget. But just to clarify, this letter, staff informed me that the staff took it upon themselves to generate this letter and to sign it.
They were upset. They were upset that the survey
That
had
the
gotten
prior
buried.
email was, it was supposed to be an internal document that was released as an attack against me and the staff that signed on to this letter. I was informed. I did not ask them to do this. They took it upon themselves to generate this letter, and they felt that it was not fair, the email that was sent prior to, and they felt that this was something that they would communicate to the council offices to express their opinions about where they stand.
Yeah, because I didn't see that one was geared toward you. Just that survey and the release of that survey information.
Right.
Then something, this one talks about something on Mayor Sam blog.
Oh, you read that? Who reads that?
Wait, I'm not reading the Mayor Sam blog. What I'm saying is, this says, last week we sent you
Don't read
documents
the blogs.
that have now been posted on Mayor Sam blog, in which the consultant he hired said that he is the cause of the department's morale problems. I don't know if you've seen this one. It seems like the whole thing, they're trying to say you're a bad morale guy. and you went
That's
to
the
Harvard,
charge.
and you have a good education, so you learn how to be a bad morale leader.
That's what they trained me for.
They changed it. Okay. Anyway,
Ms. On?
Yes, thank you. I was going to ask a little bit about what, you know, considering what we've heard about the morale, what you were going to do to address that, but it sounds like you've talked about that. What I always still feel like there's a disconnect in the department, and maybe you can give me your thoughts on this, is the relationship between the Board of Commissioners, BONC, and the department,
Right.
and the neighborhood councils, and policy, and where we're going, and strategy. And I know the first year in existence, they really were spending a lot of time on certifications and a couple of decertifications. You know, I just feel like it's kind of a disconnect with the commission. And I don't know if you've felt that or seen that, and wondered if you had some thoughts about how we might get a better synergy going between the commission and the department and
Right.
ultimately the neighborhood councils and us.
Yes, the disconnect has been more than obvious to me since I've been in the department, and I think a lot of it has had to do with the shifting nature of Dunn's role. In the prior iteration of Dunn and Bonk, the Bonk was really focused on certification, and so their role was very clear. But as we move away from certification into what I would call the sustainability phase of the neighborhood council system, where both Dunn and Bonk are transitioning into defining a new kind of role. And so what Carol and I came into was a series of prior GMs who have had their own way of working with Bonk, and really kind of a lack of clear expectations on both sides, because I see the importance of the Bonk in terms of establishing policies and procedures for the neighborhood council system and being governed by the Brown Act and being and incorporating public comment into system making. I think it's an essential element of the neighborhood council system. However, there really hasn't been a time when Carol and I were able to sit down with the Bonk and say, these are our respective roles and responsibilities, and this is how we're going to work collaboratively to make policy happen. If I had my way, I would have a policy director. We have to create so many policies and procedures around the gray areas that the charter or the plan don't address, and that's what we're working on. So we have a retreat scheduled in a couple of weeks where we are going to lay out the various elements of what it's going to take to develop a mutually collaborative relationship. And my promise to the Bonk is that we are going to do the research and make recommendations. I think the Bonk's capacity to make policy is largely hinged on staff's ability to generate good policy recommendations and analysis.
Yeah, except for that was kind of the whole work of the 912 Commission, in a way.
In a way,
In a
for
way.
the larger system.
Right.
But this, I would say that the Bonk and Dunn are going to try to fix the areas which weren't addressed by the neighborhood council system. You know, the NCRC really had kind of a large view of the system, but this is more of the short range and medium range view is how I would characterize it.
Now, your comment about if you had your way, you'd create a policy director. What would that position would be in the department?
In the department, yeah, to help analyze
Right. Is that something you
where the
would
weaknesses
want to
are.
recommend? Or I know it's a tough budget year, but I mean, you kind of do have your way as a general manager
Right.
to obviously recommend things.
Yes. I'm going
that a
to.
position you might
I think I'm
consider?
going to be able to make do with the current resources that we have. We know that it's a tough budget year. I think I could make it work with what we have. If the next budget cycle, I feel like that's an appropriate request, I'll make that.
Okay. I think those are the kind of things that I think we appreciate
Yes.
is thoughtful recommendations coming from a general manager. But, you know, and I think I would just also like to speak to the morale of the department. Certainly, it's a tough department. It's been a very tough mission that we've given this department. It's the first new department we've created in a very long time. The name itself has a huge overreaching, mission, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. And I will say, I think it's it can't be left unsaid today that I think that the untimely death of Carol, I don't think we can discount that as being a huge part of why people are feeling the way they're feeling. I mean, I would think the whole department would be grieving, as many of us were, of her passing. So, I mean, I think we got to take that into account. But I'll tell you, I sat in on the interviews for this general manager. You made you made the short list. It was basically you and Carol. Through a lot of candidates that put in for this job. And I think, Carol always looked at you as being, her partner. I mean, I really think she always thought that she was going to be able to do that job better, having you as a number 2 person. She always talked about you kind of like us. We're partners. This is how we're going to lead the department. So, I think you certainly got her stamp of approval, and I think you should feel good about that. So I think we should all look at you like that as well. You're kind of missing the other half of the partnership, but you clearly, in her mind, were the other person that she felt could really lead this department. So
Thank you, Councilwoman. It was a blessing to have worked with her.
Is bonk required in the charter?
Yes. Yes, it is. It's set forth in the charter.
you wanted to get rid of him?
Well, I'm struggling to understand why we have bonk, tell you the truth. And they missed 3 meetings, but nobody really noticed. I mean, I'm just, so whether we have to go back to the voters or not is the question on something like that. But maybe we want to trim the moving parts and focus on the neighborhood councils, which is what we're supposed to do. And I'm not sure that we can't create something other than bonk that would function better. You gave right now the best definition of bonk that I've heard. It's a little unclear. I'm not moving in that direction.
Right,
I'm
right.
just saying that we should never entrench ourselves in this system so much that we're unwilling to go to the voters and say, hey, we need to change this.
At some point, I'd like to suggest that we invite the president of the commission, after we have finished this retreat and clarify roles and responsibilities, to have that dialogue with the committee.
We would welcome that.
Thank you.
With that, I'd like to move on to public comment. If you could remain here, Mr. Kim. D. Wiseman.
Thank you, sir. There's a whole series of things to be said here. Number one, the community was not ignorant of the activities of bonk. There were people present at all of their meetings, including those that they could not get a quorum for. I was at the one in Sylmar, for instance. I'm a little surprised at the way the conversation's gone this morning. Mr. Kim is the 5th of the Dunn managers, and I think, if you recall, you got this last year this time when we looked at Dr. Carol Baker Tharp with...
I thought it was 7.
He said
It is 5. They're listed in front of you on the document I just handed you.
Okay.
They are Rosalind Stewart Wayman, Greg Nelson, Lisa Sarno, Carol Baker Tharp, and Mr. Kim. But I was expecting to hear you talking about where Dunn is going to go, and Ms. Hahn, you, I think, captured it most in my point of view. When we were here last year looking at Dr. Tharp, and of course for the first look at Mr. Kim, we had this huge hope that Dunn would be the facilitator and the supporter of neighborhood councils. Dr. Tharp started to do that. We renamed the the Empowerment Academy, the educational activity, after her, and Mr. Kim knows that many of us in the community, myself included, wanted to have the neighborhood councils take an active role in their own education in selecting the curriculum and revising it. That hasn't happened. Mr. Kim has been faced with huge challenges, no question about it. They're difficult. The most difficult challenge an administrator can face is the morale of his own staff and the assignments that he gives his staff, how he uses his resources. We were hoping to see some real changes in the past year since Dr. Tharp came on board and Mr. Kim came on board. We're still waiting for that to happen. I see this as a failure of executive power. If Mr. Kim wants a policy director, that's his department. Do it. He can do it. But I would much rather see this department begin to engage and involve the neighborhood councils rather than being just there and invisible, as Mr. Alarcon suggested. This is not an invisible department. This is a unique and extraordinary opportunity in democracy, and we're missing it unless we engage people. True democracy means everybody is engaged, everybody is involved. And it's the department's responsibility, in my opinion, and I hope you'll agree, to reach out to the community and get them involved, get them engaged, let them be their own governance. The neighborhood councils, under the previous directors, have at times felt attacked and policed, over-policed, if you will. We thought that with Dr. Tharp being present, we would be brought into the family, so to speak. Well, neighborhood councils are not going to go away, and if they are not engaged and empowered and encouraged, and I don't even think they can be empowered, they have to empower themselves. If they're not encouraged by Dunn, they'll encourage themselves, and they will spawn side groups, and it's a natural thing for us to do. We want a voice in this city, in the city's government. We've been given the opportunity to have that voice through our neighborhood councils. They still have tremendous potential to do it. They still have to abide by certain governance rules of the city, but they have much more to offer than they've been able to offer, than they've been allowed to offer, than they've been encouraged to offer. I would look forward to seeing this and every subsequent general manager have done take a much more active role, a much more effective role in bringing that about. And I hope that if Mr. Kim is the next manager and he's approved, that he'll take some of these comments to heart and show us that he really means it. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not uphold the same negative opinion of the neighborhood councils. I believe that they are performing very well, and I mostly view the neighborhood councils in my district, and I'm very pleased to work with them on everything from land use issues to service issues to quasi non-city related issues. And they've had some success, and I think there's a long way to go before they gain more empowerment. But I think neighborhood councils are a great addition to the city, and they actually have taken the burden off of me in a lot of ways. Just last week, I conducted a meeting to discuss the issue of the gang injunction that was proposed for Sylmar. We had 200 people turn out, and I don't think we would have had 200 people if the neighborhood council didn't help me spread the word and get people, pick up the phones and get people to that meeting. And it was a very productive meeting, and I think the fact that neighborhood council members I believe some of the issues of decorum in terms of how meetings are conducted is sort of settling in, because this meeting that I had, we had 50% of the people on one side and 50% of people on the other side, and yet everybody respected everybody. It was a very interesting meeting. And so no, I don't have Mr. Wiseman's negative view of the neighborhood councils. I think they're doing a great job. And so, but I also want to reiterate, this has been a tremendously tumultuous year for this department, particularly for the general manager. We lost a general manager. We, as a result of death, no other reason. That to harp on the number of general managers is sort of disrespectful. But I would also say that we did the 73 recommendations of the review commission. We are in a budget crisis, and there will be staff cutbacks. We went from a non-civil exempt process to a civil service process. This has been an amazing year, and I'm going to support you primarily because you're still standing.
Default.
But
I'm sitting right now, but I could stand it.
I say all that not to say that everything is perfect. We have a lot of work to do. Mr. Kim, it is not your job singularly. Managing a democracy is not one person's responsibility.
Well put.
But that's exactly what you are doing, and we are all responsible for that. So I commend you for hanging in there and I appreciate the fact that you put your own survey out in your department and asked your employees to criticize you, essentially, and we're strong enough to want to do that so that you could be better, because you want to do better. And so I commend you for that. I wish other general managers would follow your lead in that respect. I'm not looking at you, but that was just an accident, okay?
Maybe you want to do that for your office.
Yeah, I'm going to do that for my office. Although the results will be very different.
Of course.
So, Mr. Kim, I'm pleased to support you as the next general manager, and
Second.
And
Absolutely.
it's a unanimous opinion of this committee, but we do recognize we have a lot of work to do, and we've made a lot of changes this year, which means we have a lot more work to do, and we're going to continue to do that work. So congratulations, and this committee, it's a unanimous decision to recommend your hiring as a general manager,
Appointment.
permanent general manager.
Approve his
Your appointment. Approve your appointment as general manager of the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment.
Thank you,
And
Council.
with that, we can move right on to item number 2.
Okay, and this item will be in council next Tuesday, May 20th.
Item number 2 is a verbal presentation by the General Manager of Dunn relative to the Regional Neighborhood Congress on May 17th.
Thank you. This is to update you on the May 17th event, which is the first of what I would like to see as regular convenings of neighborhood councils. My plan is to conduct one regional congress a year and one citywide congress a year. And the idea basically is to engage people on a regional level to help increase the visibility of neighborhood councils, to help them reach out to their adjacent neighborhood councils. And when Carol and I first came on, the first thing that we did was do regional gatherings, basically to meet people, to hear what their concerns were, for us to communicate what our plans were. And I would like to continue doing that. But this is really in line with what the NCRC also saw as adding value to the neighborhood council system, is doing things more on a regional basis, because it makes neighborhood councils more accessible. As we know, geography is one major barrier for this city. It's very hard for somebody from San Pedro to think about coming up to East LA. So the idea here that was fully embraced by the South LA neighborhood councils, about 18 of them, and this started with the Empowerment Congress people, where they discussed, we would love to have a gathering of people to talk about how do we get a stronger and consistent policy advocacy voice out of South LA. We've had a series of meetings, and our role is really to be the supporter and the facilitator for making this happen. So they've decided on 2 major policy issues, one addressing land use and the second one around gang violence. And we expect anywhere from 400 to 500 people, which is what we actually, the number of attendees at our last citywide Congress was 500 people, I think. So that in itself is evidence that if we go in the regional basis, we're actually able to reach deeper into communities and generate a lot more interest in the neighborhood
When is this
councils.
gonna happen?
May 17th
May 17th.
at West Adams, May 17th, I'm sorry, next Saturday at the West Adams Prep, and we've notified all the council offices. There's time to speak for elected officials during lunchtime. And we have the general manager for Department of Planning and CRA engaging in dialogue with neighborhood council leaders. And it's really designed for maximum participant participation. So we have the dialogue set up, and then we're going to break up into a lot of small groups where people are going to identify what the issues of concern are, where they feel the gaps are in terms of strategy and policy, and also, but most
Who came
importantly,
up with the opening session? Who was going to speak?
that was all guided by the neighborhood councils themselves. So this is, this is very much.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe that they're having Mark Ridley Thomas in the opening session and not Bernard Parks.
Yes, I know.
That's the problem.
That is part of what it takes to have neighborhood councils lead. We could not impose upon them who should speak and who shouldn't. So while I recognize the delicate nature of that issue, we had to work with it.
Bernard's not speaking? and
Well, he can
Mark's
speak.
He's been invited to speak at lunchtime.
This is his district, though.
Yeah, he's been invited to speak at lunchtime, though. So,
But he's not on the schedule?
No,
And
he's
Mark
not on the
is?
schedule.
no,
He's not going to be happy with that.
No, he's not going to be happy.
I know.
I do. I mean, obviously, you can't ignore politics, but I do think
That's got
that
to-
might be a little bit more of your role is to maybe do a quick politics 101 to neighborhood councils,
They're very much
And-
aware of the politics.
and at least make them aware of the politics. I mean,
Yes.
I think they're very aware of this. Yeah, how was
I don't know.
How was Senator Thomas, Mark Ridley Thomas selected?
The part of the partners that were involved in this convening were the Empowerment Network of Empowerment Congress neighborhood councils. And as you know, they are related to, Mark
right.
when he was council office. So he
Right.
basically expanded that network of empowerment congresses. So they have a very significant relationship with him. And that's how, he surfaced as an opening speaker.
Yeah.
But we've sent invitations to the councilman
They
and
know
asked
that
him to
he's chair of budget and
participate.
finance.
Yes, they know.
And that we're going over the neighborhood council budgets right now.
I've made them more than aware of the political implications, and they understand. But this is part of what it takes to work with neighborhood councils. I did not feel it was my place to impose on them who should speak and who shouldn't.
So this is basically for the southern part of the city or for the valley?
For
and the west?
South LA.
South LA.
Yeah, about approximately 18 neighborhood councils coming together. And so one major issue that they're going to address is black-brown relations. And we think that's a very important issue to address, particularly in South LA with a lot of the racial dynamics and conflicts that are going on. So the politics aside, we're very excited about this particular pilot effort. And already neighborhood councils throughout the city have been talking to me about wanting to do a similar kind of event in their area. West LA is starting to convene regular breakfast meetings of neighborhood councils in their region.
How are these
So
funded?
they're funded partially by Department of Neighborhood Empowerment funds and partly neighborhood council funds.
Ooh, it's getting worse.
I don't think Bernard Park's going to be too happy.
No. Especially
Well,
with city funds.
yeah, it's an interesting
Dynamic.
scenario.
Yes, it is.
Suggestion, but just
See, if we weren't funding it and they were funding it, but then when the city starts funding it, then it's kind of like.
yeah, but that doesn't, just because I'm funding something doesn't mean I have to speak at every opportunity. But I mean, I let me put it this way: I believe the neighborhood councils involved here, those people who participated in the decision, for who the speaker would be, knew very well the political dynamics that are going on in their community. And if they choose them, they choose them. I think my colleagues are not suggesting that council members have to speak at everything, but I think they are. I think they are. I think they are. I think they are pointing out, and I'm interpreting that for myself as well, that there are political consequences sometimes for these kinds of things, and so.
Especially when you're both running for the same, if Parks wasn't running, you're running for the same.
I would agree. I would be very upset if I was running for something and the city was funding something and my opponent was speaking and I wasn't.
That would. I'm glad you're the interim almost of general. You know? Let's
Anyway.
get you confirm before he sees this flyer.
Really?
Okay, then with that, we'll have public comment. Mr. Wiseman?
Yeah.
This is going to be controversial.
I would be pissed.
I would be.
I would be pissed.
Yeah, and I was just advised that the council has a bare quorum today, so we have to get down.
Congratulations.
Mr. Wiseman?
Thank you. Before I start the subject that I wish to bring to you, any comment of yours, Mr. Alarcon, that I'm negative toward the neighborhood councils is not so. I couldn't be more positive.
think you are.
You're entitled to your opinion, but
That's
I'm
right,
sorry.
but can you speak to this
I'm
item?
entitled to
Can you
counter
speak to
it.
this item?
This is public comment, and I'm
No,
commenting
this is
on
not
your
public
comment.
This is relative to item number 2.
I'm sorry. No, I requested to do public comment in the general public comment
No,
area.
this is relative to item number 2. You put a card in for item number 2.
No, I put in item number 3.
Is this you, D. Wiseman?
Yeah.
0351?
Well, just to clarify, I would
you
like
wanna
to
speak to
comment
item
on...
number 2 or
No,
not?
sir. Number
Okay,
3,
thank you very
when you're
much.
ready for that.
Thank you. Then, with regard to item number 2?
3 is continued. Item number 3 is continued?
3 is continued, yes.
All right.
Yeah. Item number 3,
Is
there a matter
can I just,
before us?
are we on, are we
Just
still
It's
on
a
2?
discussion item
was
only.
just
There's
a-
no.
on 2?
it's just an informational item.
Yeah, I know. I'm just back to this. How were council members notified about this?
We had sent letters to all the council offices regarding the event and asked for their participation. Was sent last week, I believe.
In that area.
All the council offices.
I don't-
Citywide?
Did we get something?
There we go.
I know. I never
Could've gotten
remember
one.
seeing it, but that doesn't mean anything. I get a lot of mail, but
I just saw the flyer.
and my neighborhood councils were notified in South Los Angeles.
This went out to all neighborhood councils about the event. It's open to everybody.
Right. I mean, this is happening Saturday.
Yes.
Today's Tuesday. I mean, it's the first I've heard of it.
Me too.
First I've heard
How
of
about
it.
you, Mr. Alacon?
Well, my staff mentioned that they were doing regional councils. I was not aware of the speakers. I want to make that very clear.
Were you made aware that you were invited to come speak at lunch?
No. I wasn't aware
I knew,
that was happening.
I knew I wasn't available, so my staff didn't
Oh.
even present it to me.
I didn't even know what was happening until now.
Huh? I'm not available either, but still. Okay.
I'm pretty sure we sent letters out to all the offices.
Okay. Well, I mean, I just think,
You don't wanna
as we're
put
talking
that
about,
in one?
I know, really, as we're talking about you and the department and empowering neighborhood councils, as you can see, there still feels like, sometimes things happen in a vacuum, and it shouldn't be that way. There's no use. Information is knowledge is power, as our colleague Tom LeBon says.
He always.
And there's no use something like this happening in a vacuum
Yeah, thank you.
and not having.
There
I
is
will do
no
a better job
matter
of communicating
before, so-
in the future.
You're okay to leave. I would like to continue this discussion. So we may create another item to follow up on this item because
Thank you.
I don't know. I'm not clear on how the decision was made, and I'm not sure that all the neighborhood council members who have an interest here played a role and were fully aware of the potential ramifications. And it's a very dangerous situation. And I just,
Yeah.
I would like to understand that process better of how this agenda were made up. I don't know how the Empowerment Congress decides who speaks at the neighborhood council regional meeting. That is a concern to me. So I think we should
Right.
follow up on
And
this.
frankly, the fact
Because
that,
we don't want to see these neighborhood councils hurt.
yeah,
I mean,
and I agree with you. And I think that is part of your job. I think it's one thing to say it's all about empowering neighborhood councils. They do what they want. It's up to them. They set the agenda. But I do think with the City of LA's seal on there, I think you have a little bit of responsibility helping to maybe just, say this is probably inappropriate in an election year to have, your one person running, getting the keynote speech, and the other who's a sitting city council member being relegated to city council members at lunch.
I'm more than open to suggestions about how to handle these
Yeah, I just
dynamics.
think you got to be a little more.
It's-
I mean, again, you want to empower neighborhood councils. I think
we
there is a role to play for not necessarily mandating it, but making it pretty clear that that could be hurtful to what they want to accomplish.
Yes, I'm aware of it, and we'll discuss it some more at the next
Thank
meeting.
you. We don't have any action item on this, so thank you
Okay.
very much. With that, we have public comment. Mr. Wiseman, you're free to make all the negative comments you want.
Oh.
You want to pass?
Ooh.
What, you going to intimidate me by staring at me, or what? Well, I appreciate silence, quite frankly, so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
That's because he has